you sleep on it, you won't do it because it's a bad idea.
Today we're going to be talking about Drone, I Am Robot, Scavengers Reign.
I Am a Robot. It had budget limitations, so the cheat is that you actually really don't see any human characters. And I was actually working on Scavengers when I was doing those, so it was sort of like a nighttime thing.
Do these stories just come from pure curiosity of AI?
There's always something. It was interesting because these were all before AI was quite so hot. At some point, I just had to write 3 scripts in like a weekend, so I was like, oh fuck. I think I know intuitively, don't write a thing where it's a crowd of people on a ship that's swaying in the ocean with water splashing up the side. Each one has a custom outfit.
Yeah, of course.
And then I did this thing where I cut the beginning and end out of every scene. It cut it down from 90 pages to 40 pages. And it was like, holy shit.
I saw I'm Not a Robot.
Oh, yes. It's a very mean-spirited short that I don't think I'll ever release.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, you guys look so good and clean, your video image.
Oh, thanks. You look really organised because you've got a board of post-it notes. That means extra planning and organisation.
Some big ideas about the future.
But yeah, I really appreciate your time, Sean. I know you are, of course, crazy busy, and just thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sean, let's just start off with a straight-up introduction of who you are, your name, and what do you do?
Yeah, sure. My name is Sean Buckelew. I am an animator, writer, director type person. I feel like I still self-identify as someone who works mostly in independent animation, but in the last couple of years have moved into TV and maybe hopefully some movies.
Today we're going to be talking about a few of your past projects like Drone, for example, and I Am Robot. And we'll touch on a little bit of Scavengers Reign. We got a few questions from our audience, which sent in some questions on social media.
Cool.
Briefly, how did you get into the world of animation?
I was a big fan of Dragon Ball Z.
As of many.
As many are wont to be. My dad used to work at IBM, and so I grew up with a lot of computers. It was at a time when you could go to these like convention centers where they would do like computer expos, and I got like a $15 copy of probably 2 versions back of Macromedia Flash. So this is like 2001, 2002, and there was a really nice community of people on the internet, the like beta, like B3TA era and the Newgrounds era. There was a guy from the UK named Joel Veach, and so I emailed this guy Joel Veach saying like, how do I make keyframes in Flash? And I think he actually had like a stock response, because so many people probably emailed him this question that he was like, here's how you do basic tweening. So I started just making Flash animations, on a mouse. A lot of those kind of Newgrounds guys were what really interested me when I was like probably then doing it in high school. If you're in California, there's this thing called the California State Summer School of the Arts. It's hosted at the Cal Arts campus, which is a big animation school. And you can go for a month in the summer and live in the dorms. And it was mostly run by faculty from the experimental animation department. At that school, there's character animation, experimental animation. And I feel like as a high schooler, I was watching like Pixar movies and Miyazaki movies. And so I felt like character animation was sort of what I, by default, was interested in. I went to this program and it was just my introduction to so much cooler kind of shit that was like European independent short culture, like that short film, The Man Who Planted Trees. I'm 17 and it just is blowing my mind because I'm like, just had no access to this stuff because it never played on TV and it didn't cross over to any of the kind of internet Flash communities at all. So that was exciting.
So obviously getting into like character animation stuff, your first one that we could see online was the bear one where it replaces the dad. Was that kind of where you got into characters like 2D hand-drawn?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, that was my undergraduate thesis film, and I didn't finish it when I was in school. It took like another year and a half because it was colored pencil on paper, which is a huge mistake that I never made again. It was the first film I ever uploaded that got like a Vimeo staff pick, which was a super big deal, in nice, 2012, 2013. I didn't write a script, but like I boarded it kind of more properly, where like when I was doing Flash animation beforehand, I would do like one scene at a time, just like, what's next? I don't know. I have no structure to this. So that was after I had studied a little bit more formally how to make stuff.
Do you ever like go back to the kind of like freestyling it, or is it quite part of your structure of creating a short?
I think Love Streams was the last one that I would say a lot of stuff happened on the fly. I think it's funny because it's like in school, I think there's an expectation to show people your storyboards. And then I think by the time I was at Drone, there were other reasons to need to show people formed up earlier stages. But Love Streams was the last one where it was kind of just like, I don't really need to show anyone till it's done. So there can be freestyle insofar as I'm reworking parts from the beginning. I'm going back and forth. I'm in total control of the end to end, which is also synonymous with I have no budget, so it's just me working on it. But like, there's no intervention between me and the end process. So in Love Streams, there's this big chat scene at the opening.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about that actually.
That got redone probably like 8 times.
When I was watching that chat scene, it felt so real. The timing of it, the response, the waiting time. I was just drawn into it.
Yeah.
I guess it's the skills of like writing and timing, but what was the process for that?
That is all assembled in Flash for some reason. There's probably much smarter ways to do it, but each letter is typed out as a keyframe. So
really?
Stupid. I don't know why. Or maybe it's not a keyframe, but it's a keyframe mask to reveal
Each letter?
each letter.
That sounds really painful.
It's really stupid. But I think that allowed for something that if you did it in an automatic way in After Effects, just with like the typewriter function, it would look more like how text always looks in movies, where it's just automated, where I felt like it's like there's something about doing it key by key where you could really dial and once it's built, it's actually really easy to like modulate the timing. I really want this to feel authentic to, in my case, AOL Instant Messenger, but it's like, you just get this thing for free that it has that function where it says your friend is typing. And it's like, that can be this emotional thing of like, oh, they're saying something. Whoop, they stopped.
And then they've gone for a long time.
Exactly.
And then they're back.
You're feeling the invisible person's thoughts just with this one like blinking piece of text.
They'll say like BRB. It's like, well, you was just about to say something.
What were you going to say? And if you're a teenager, you're like, were you going to say you love me?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like that conversation there in Love Streams, I think there's a huge percentage of people that have had that conversation, you know, or experienced those emotions.
Yeah. Somebody told me the story that I think about all the time that felt like the true extension of that experience, where they were like, I talked to this person for a really long time. We talked basically all through high school, and then they met up, didn't say a single thing to each other, just sat in silence, and then both went home. And then he went back to the computer and said, will you marry me?
What?
Oh, it's actually totally overwhelming to see this person in person. But when I'm back behind the like cipher of my username, I'm like, oh, what I was actually experiencing was like total certainty that like I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you.
It seems to be something that you've included in other shorts, like the YouTube live chat in Drone. There's something also like super real about that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just observing the like patterns of this is what it feels like when there's a rush of messages. There's like a kind of rhythm to it. I mean, I have a feeling like when it's done in movies and it's wrong, everybody knows it. People don't take that reality seriously enough. Like the fact that a movie can't nail the internet yet. And it's like, we're pretty deep into the internet. But then it's also, you know, it's a fun writing exercise.
I was going to say, what's it like to write something like that?
Very fun.
Do you, as a writer, experience these things or see these things and then it sparks a story that you have ever kind of written because of, you know, internet social situations and things?
I feel like it's usually like two things coming together. For Drone, there was an op-ed in The Guardian that was about drone manufacturer thinks drones are misunderstood. Like a commentary about like, why did we name them Predator drones? We should have called them something nicer because then there would just be more positive associations. That is point A. Then the live stream thing comes in as point B. Then it's a net, and the net can catch a lot of other different ideas. I remember I watched Terminator 2, and I was like, oh, this is such a perfect expansion of the Terminator, is that this one is good. Isn't that sort of funny through the lens of a robot? Isn't it funny if it's a drone because drones are misunderstood? And then it's like, who are the characters to hang off of that, to tell that story and have it make sense? Yeah, I Am a Robot I read this book, but then I had just watched the movie of Remains of the Day, that Anthony Hopkins, where he's a very servile butler from like generations of butlers. It's like told from the perspective of the butler who just loves his master. And then I saw this comedian, Kevin Krieger, do a set. He like flipped the mic stand upside down. And he said, I'm going to eat the mic stand's asshole. And I was like, okay, it's this guy playing a Roomba and he's in love with his masters like the butler from Remains of the Day. And at some point there was an idea that it was going to be a feature, and it was going to be that the Roomba was the Roomba of like Republican senators in the lead up to the war in Iraq. And then it became this.
Do these stories, especially I Am a Robot and Drone, just come from pure current curiosity of AI? Or are they like situations you imagine can actually happen?
I guess it's a little bit of both. There's always something. I think that the Roomba one, that was the first one I came up with from that set. Also, I pitched part of this idea to FX. Technically, those shorts were commissioned by FX. So there was a nice thing where it was like, at some point, I just had to write 3 scripts in like a weekend. So I was like, oh, fuck. So there's some necessity there. And then I think at that point, you're just like, okay, what's interesting? One was I read a book that said that it's still actually legally unclear who's responsible when a self-driving car hits somebody.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it was interesting because these were all before AI was quite so hot. Like, it was all pre ChatGPT really blowing up on the scene.
I was watching these shorts, like the AI, like the robots, like the cleaning device and the self-driving car, just giving them like personalities. Like when the cleaning device bumps into the human, and that's an everyday occurrence, could be. But then people ask the question, are they real? Do they have feelings? Do they not?
Mr. Stevens has important things to do, and you go and you get in his way like that.
I am firmly on the side of they don't have feelings. You should kill AI. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It's like, there's like a Bruce Sterling thing of like, if you program a robot hand to wave at you and, you know, you give it the input to do this and then it does it and you go, oh, it's waving at me. And it's like, joke's on you, motherfucker. It's not waving.
Yeah, and it doesn't care and it's not greeting you in any way.
Exactly. I think there is a funny through line of like, you can anthropomorphize lots of different things. I think that's why I've got kind of like an obsession with like a smiley face as a representation of a thing. It's in Love Streams and it's in Drone, and it's in a new thing I'm working on just because I feel like it's the most basic primitive expression that everybody understands, but it's so graphically simple. I mean, on the Drone, I think it's funny because it's like, it's on what you kind of call the head, but actually the head or the brain of a drone is really in that like bottom part. It'd be like if somebody drew a smiley face on the back of your neck and then animals went up to it and went like, oh, you'd be like, oh, this is wrong in every way, but whatever. Just that kind of thing of like, how much does a thing need to feel like a person before you don't want to hurt it? So I feel like Drone, I mean, I don't know how successful it is, but it attempts to get to this kind of emotional place that also to me is underwritten by like, this whole fucking thing is like stupid and absurd and what are we doing here? You know,
I know that you mentioned that you were commissioned to do, like, was it writing for FX?
Yeah, they had a program called Cake where a lot of great shorts came out of this program. I'd like to do a series of shorts that are just 2 minutes each, like a confession from a household smart object. Those came together really fast. And I was actually working on Scavengers when I was doing those. So it was sort of like a nighttime thing. But within this Cake program, there was a lot of freedom to just kind of make whatever you wanted. So it was very cool.
Talking about like visual style and the animation process, how did the animation techniques like differ between Drone and I Am Robots? They seem quite similar, but did you experiment with anything different between the two?
Basically, I think like the exact same team. I work with this art director, Wes McLean, a lot, who did the backgrounds for both. He's really good. And he was the art director on this new show, Common Side Effects, that we did. So it's kind of in the like drone visual universe. There's a studio in Montreal, ED Films, that did the CG for the drone, and they did the CG for the car and the Roomba. I would say on I'm a Robot, it had budget limitations and just I had personal time limitations. So the cheat is that like you actually really don't see any human characters. There's like no lip sync, and that's just a rule. So Drone had a lot more like that guy giving the speech at the podium just took forever to animate because it's basically like they like never stop moving. It's always on twos and you're like, oh God. Which again, I think it's this thing that happens where you do some animation demos early on, just be like, okay, I'm going to figure out the look. On Drone, for example, it's animated in Flash. I still use that program just because I think it's so fast. I've never gotten fast at TV Paint the way that I am at Flash. But I was doing this system where you do, Flash has this is really in the weeds, but it has these, like you can do graphic symbols, so you can have nested animation. And so I did this thing for that where it's like the head is always this nested animation that's then attached to the neck.
Oh, okay.
It just allowed for like kind of complicated head rotations. Also, there was a thing where I was working with the art director, Russ McLean, for the first time. He does this incredible background painting with really realistic light, and then you kind of have to go like, okay, how do I get this character to live in this place where it doesn't look like really flat and like just they're popping off of it? So then it requires you to go like, okay, you need to have two-tone shadows You often need to have rim lights, you know.
So the backgrounds come first before you get animating the characters?
I'm such a bad background designer, but I feel like it's useful for me to at least to be animating over like the BG layout instead of just like my sketch. Also, it just was the schedule that like Wes was done with every background in the film a year before I was done animating. So he was able to get through that faster than I was able to get through animation. So it just naturally happened that I would have the backgrounds first. And I needed stuff where it was like the 3D studio really needed the backgrounds because they're like, we need to match the like focal length and perspective. And I actually don't know how they did that. It was very impressive to see like, oh, we're just going to build the camera so that it really looks like it's in this space perfectly. And you're like, oh, crazy.
I was going to ask about that. The integration of CG and 2D, you know, drone and I Am a Robot. Did this story benefit from them being in 3D?
Robots are better because they don't bend, but keeping that drone on model as a drawn element just would have been impossible. Just because if it's bendy at all, whereas a person, there's some flexibility because we're squishy things. And then working with the studio was really nice because I felt like they were like, oh, we're going to do a line that is trying to match your flash line. We're going to do these colors kind of match how you are rendering your characters. When it came in, it's like probably in like 2 weeks that drone footage all came together, and suddenly it's like, oh, 5 minutes of the movie just clicked in, whereas it takes me 2 weeks to do 5 seconds of character animation, you know, of a guy talking. So I liked how it looked. I think it made it look better than it would have looked if it were animated. Yeah.
Talking about like ideas for stories, I saw, was it I'm Not a Robot?
Oh, yes.
Was that a short film? Because I only saw a still of the classic, you prove that you're not a robot.
It's a very mean-spirited short that I don't think I'll ever release. It's funny, it has generative AI in it, I made it in 2019, but it was inspired by this website called This Person Does Not Exist.
Oh, is it the AI generated random people
Yes.
that you go, oh my gosh, that looks so real, and you just skip through faces?
So that website I saw, and now later I've learned that like that is trained on an image data set. So as much as these people don't exist, they do actually exist. And so the reason why I don't want to post the short is because it's the CAPTCHA thing. It's sort of increasingly compromising questions, but one of the things is click all the faces that you would identify as ugly. At the time, it was funny. And that film played at festivals and played just like a comedy short. It was really fun. It's like you, the clicker, are becoming increasingly like judgmental. And then at some point it says like, oh, okay, it looks like you are a human, you fucking piece of shit. That was sort of the point. You're a judgmental, violent, awful person. So yes, you're human. That short was fun because I made it in like 2 days because it was really simple to do. And it's really dumb. But
Entertaining in a crowd.
And we had this group where our slogan was never sleep on it. And I feel like there's ideas that are like that, where it's like, if you sleep on it, you won't do it because it's a bad idea. But if you do it right now and execute it full force right when it comes to you, before you think too hard about it, you'll be so happy that you actually did it because now it's a thing that exists. And I put that in the never sleep on it category of filmmaking.
Gotcha. I mean, do you do that yourself, like with ideas, like sleep on it and see what it's like the next day, and does it change?
Yeah, I feel like it'll happen where I had an idea about, this is more of a live action, about sourcing of precious metals for making computers. So that's an example of just like, it's that. Okay, where does the tin come from? Where does the lithium come from? Where does this stuff come from? Is there an idea there? Is there a story there? Don't know. Let me just sit on it. And the title was Gray Gold. I was like, Gray Gold, that's kind of an evocative title. And it's what they call lithium. So let's just leave that there. And then it was probably like a year of just that sitting in the back of your head. And then it's like something else comes along and it activates the idea. It's no longer called Gray Gold. It's this other thing now. But it was like, I think if I had sat down and forced it, it would have been like, that wouldn't have worked either, because then I would have been like struggling to come up with a story around this subject that I thought was interesting, but didn't naturally point to a story. So
rather than forcing it, you let the dots kind of connect themselves naturally. Like it could be 3 weeks later where you're sitting at 2 a.m, you wake up and you go,
Exactly, yeah. When you're writing for TV, you don't have that luxury because you have to, you've got to be ready the next morning basically with new pitches for ideas. So that is the luxury of working on your own ideas. Similarly, I think that there's that version of things where you're coming up with just completely original ideas from out of thin air. But I think there's conversely the FX version of it, which is you have a prompt. Okay, you got to make 3 shorts about smart household objects confessing. Go. I don't do it so often, but I think that creating that as an exercise for yourself, you could really generate a lot of ideas if you said, okay, prompt animals at the zoo expressing their opinions about people. When I was in college, Chris Sullivan, who is this independent animator in Chicago, I went to school in Chicago, making basically a feature with a very small crew. It took him 12 years to make, called Consuming Spirits. I plug this every chance I get because I think it's like the most underseen, incredible movie. It's like 2.5 hours. It's rated R. It's really intuitive and interesting. And it's the movie that I show to my most serious, like, cinephile live action friends who aren't that into animation. I go like, if you watch this movie and aren't convinced that animation has this potential, it's very humanistic, but it also like could only be animated. It's half cutouts, half 2D. It's all shot on film. And then this other animator named Jim Traynor, who actually is the unofficial inspiration point for the I Am a Robot series, because he did these series of films that are like monologue confessions from different animals. So there's this short called Bats. You can watch it online. Bats in like the 1400s in like a Mayan temple, but it's just the point of view of a bat who is sort of very dumb, but it still has some spiritual sense of, at the end it says like, I was so happy I prayed to God that I might live forever. And I'm like, I really like a little peanut-sized thing having this aspiration towards something like a spiritual impulse. So I think that inspiration comes from that point where I think I just really loved those movies, and you kind of can't control that, where it's like that will just get channeled through you. You'll end up making stuff like the stuff you like, you know, whether you want to or not.
Luke Stret25 said, does the length of the film affect how to approach it as a writer and director, and does the budget affect the approach too?
Yes and no. That's a great question. Never have I gone, okay, I have this much money, I'm gonna write this type of story. That's just a practical thing where it just never comes together that way. I think I know intuitively, don't write a thing where it's a crowd of people on a ship that's swaying in the ocean with water splashing up the side. You know, it's like, I just wouldn't write that.
And they're all talking.
And they're all talking. And each one has a custom outfit.
Yeah, of course.
I did this fun exercise on this 9/11 short. It was a feature. It was like, this is only really producible as a short. So I did this thing where I was like, I'd like to try shortening this as much as possible without changing any story elements. And then I did this thing where I cut the beginning and end out of every scene. So no character ever enters or exits anywhere. You're just in the next scene. And I would say it cut it down from 90 pages to like probably like 40 pages. And it was like, holy shit, that just shows how much I didn't need in this other version of the script. And in doing that, it's like all the shoe leather, all the shit that would be hard to animate got taken out, where it's basically just like, people are immediately in the next scene sitting down and talking, you know, and you're like, good, I'm in the meat of it. And when you watch the animatic now, it's like that, I think, manifests as feeling like very confident editing, but actually was just this process of stripping it back. But I mean, in terms of, I don't know, it's like you can write a 15-page script in a weekend that will then take you years to execute. So there's a weird thing where I feel like it's like, I mean, on this new short I'm working on, I would say I've written and rewritten basically the entire script like 8 times over, because the material of writing is so cheap that I think nowadays I'm more like, let me try to figure it out in this stage where it's less expensive, both in terms of literally expensive and in terms of like time expense. If I can figure it out in writing, I'll save myself, you know, the 2 days it would take to storyboard it. And if I can solve it in storyboarding, then it'll save me the 2 weeks it'll take to animate it. So I've been more rigorous about that, where I feel like I was less rigorous in the past, trying to use writing as like, this is actually how you mediate expensive shit later, if you can sort of see it in your head. Yeah.
Is that something that you feel that you have to do or want to do for everybody on the project?
Yeah. I think that it's a mix, because I think that it's, I mean, on something like the short, it's like, I'm going to be paying the price for it later anyway. You know, someone is going to be paying the price. And I feel like actually on TV, writing on Scavengers and other stuff, it's such a crazy schedule that you're very cognizant about how what you do will fuck up the next person down the line. So it's like, you have a similar intuition of like, I also shouldn't write it's 500 people on a ship. I think there's a difference when you're writing something and you know that it's going to get made versus writing something and it's just sort of an exercise. Like, I'm writing this live action feature and I don't have a strong sense of what is difficult to do in live action the way that I would in animation. So it's like, I could see later going like, do I have to do this outside, or could I do it like in a warehouse? You know, because shooting outside is really complicated and shooting in a warehouse is much easier. These things that I don't know yet, but I think actually the worst type of person, not the worst type of person. There is a type of person who is a...
Sounds like an internet website that doesn't exist yet, or maybe
the worst type of
person.com.
Is a person who writes but has no idea how to execute anything. Those are the people who I think write things that are impossible to execute. You know, it's advantaged me as a writer to have some awareness of what is complex and what isn't, and to just know what you're asking for and kind of like have some sense of visualization in your head as you're writing it. It's actually usually useful for creativity to say, you know what, I'm going to have it where I don't ever want to have a group of characters walking. That will lead you to be clever, I think, with solutions. Whereas, you know, I feel like you see it throughout time of like when a director or writer has just like carte blanche to do whatever they want, it doesn't necessarily lead to good things. It's when there's real guardrails that you're like, now I have to be smart about how I do this because I can't just go crazy, you know.
That makes sense, absolutely. And I guess that's similar-ish to, you know, like if you're watching in like an anime.
Exactly.
You know,
yeah.
If it's a mid-shot, you haven't got to worry about the feet, the contact points, all that stuff, the leg animation. If it's shot behind over the shoulder, you haven't got to worry so much about lip sync. There's all these things that as an animator or ways around it that helps everybody else.
We talked about this when we were working on Scavengers, that like there's that show Evangelion that is very popular.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like it almost works its limitations into the story where it's like, we've got these robots and they can only run for like a minute really before they give you brain damage, whatever the plot of that show is. But then it's like, I've never seen a show where they're like, we're going to stretch the shit out of the budget in the middle, but we're going to give you a minute and a half of really A+ stuff. Most of the story is going to be everyone arguing about who's going to get into the robot or not. But then when we do it, it's going to be the last minute of the show, and it's going to be awesome. And then the first minute of the next episode will also be awesome. And then the whole thing's going to slow down again. I think we as viewers don't mind that. And I think that because it's satisfying a promise that the story is making you kind of formally and narratively.
I remember seeing a clip like the other week, actually. There was one shot in an animation in Japan. I can't remember the...
Oh, Wind Rises. That it's the huge group of people.
Yeah, group of people climbing over each other.
Yeah.
It took like 1.5 years to do.
It's fucked up.
Insane.
It's when you realize that working for Miyazaki probably fucking sucks.
Yeah, when you get to that shot on your plate in the morning.
Yeah, and he goes, thank you for doing this. It's going to take you 1.5 years. Are you okay with that? And you go, Of course, you're the master, Miyazaki. I'll do anything for you. And he goes, great.
Just crack on, get in that room and don't come out.
And I'm going to come up to you every 6 months smoking a cigarette going like, is it finished yet?
Nice, right. Well, thanks for the insights and breaking down the process of your work so far, Sean.
Yeah, was this good? Was this okay?
No, this is incredible. Honestly, I really appreciate your time and everything that you've given us insights to. It's incredible. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.